Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. This is about Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. I'm Jackie.
And I'm Sarah.
I'm Ronnie.
I'm Holly.
And I'm Lauren.
And we're going to be talking about this book today, giving our opinions and everything. We're going to start off with Lauren.
Okay, before we get into talking about the book, we wanted to talk a little bit about Simon Sinek and just what he has kind of done in the role of educational and personal development books, and then he's also done a TED Talk as well. So we kind of wanted to start off by just talking a little bit about the TED Talk that he had filmed years back, and in that TED Talk he just talks a little bit about everyone's why, and that it's really important as a leader and as a leader of an organization that everybody within the company, including the leader themselves, knows the why of the company and what the organization is looking for. That way this fosters healthy relationships within all of the members of that company. And so we thought that was kind of an important intro to talk about our book today, which he also talks about leaders. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Holly, do you want to go next?
I sure can. One of my favorite parts of the book, I know my favorite leader is right at the beginning, Bob Chapman, and how he took over kind of a struggling company and made it flourish. And he definitely talked about having a new culture of caring allows people to just be really comfortable with where they work. And so when he first came on, everything was very timed out. Company employees couldn't call their families, take breaks unless they clocked out. And it was just very, very structured. And when he came on, everyone just felt super uncomfortable with it. And so he just restructured everything. He allowed there to be free payphones for companies to call their families if necessary. There was allowing to share PTO between company employees if any family members went through a hard time. And they just really had just this culture of caring. And so that was allowing his company to almost double in profits over the time that he led the company. And I just thought that was really amazing. And he really touches on how you have to feel as if your employees are like your children, and if something happens, you wouldn't just drop your child. So it's the same thing with the people you work with.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it brings a sense of protection to the company that you're working with, and he talks in multiple chapters throughout the book about that circle of safety, and that it's really important that we facilitate that in the company to where everyone feels safe, so they're not looking they're not looking within for other dangers, but everyone can work together to focus on the dangers that come from outside.
Yeah, one of the quotes he says is working with a sense of obligation is replaced by working with a sense of pride. And so I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with their positions if they don't feel safe. Then they just go to work just to make a paycheck to help their families out. And that's not what work should be. And it's so sad that to be happy at our job is just such a wish that some people think they'll never achieve. And whenever you are happy with your job and your leader just has this culture of, hey, let's just work with each other and support each other the best we can. And then you're going to work not only to make a profit to help your families out and pay for everything in life, because life is expensive, but also just really enjoying it as well. We should have both, because I mean, we're at our jobs 40, 60 hours a week, and we should really enjoy what we're doing.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, going off of your favorite person being Bob Chapman, I really enjoyed all the stories in this book, but mine that I really resonated with was James Sinek from Costco, and just the way that he chose to lead his company and how they were able to back that with the statistics of how successful Costco really was. And so he put his employees first. Even when they were financially struggling, he chose to keep his employees on. And I thought that was really cool, leading kind of from behind the scenes. That's something that I really resonate with. When I tend to lead, I like to lead from behind and empower all of my employees. In this case, I like to empower them to be the best that they can be. And so I really enjoyed reading about James Sinek. So I wanted to open up the floor if anybody else had anybody that they really resonated with. I know you said Bob Chapman, but does anybody else have someone they resonated with?
Yeah, mine wasn't really a leader of the company, but when he kept mentioning Johnny Bravo and just the way that he approached leadership in the military, it almost pointed to this need to kind of develop your skills as a leadership for knowing your people's needs before they know even, or just being aware enough to see those without them bringing them to you. He gave lots of examples of that for Johnny Bravo, but I feel like that is really applicable to us as healthcare workers when we're seeking to build our empathy for our patients. Is that something we have to build on our own? that allows us to see the needs of our patients, even when maybe they can't articulate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think with all of those leaders Phil talked about, I think a big theme is humility. Just because, one, I think, Holly, like with what you said, someone having to step in and like kind of take charge and say, okay, these are the changes we're going to make for the betterment of the employees. I think it shows like that can be really scary to step in and make those decisions, because you can get a lot of backlash. It might not be what people are used to. And so just knowing, I think, as a leader, how much you genuinely value the people that are working for you, and also kind of like the statistics behind it of like, you know, companies are a lot more successful whenever the employees are well taken care of, and that somebody in leadership is really taking steps to make sure they are cared for, and that their personal lives are important, their families are important. And so I think with all of those leaders, a really big theme is humility and just their willingness to maybe at first step into something that's uncomfortable, knowing that it's for the betterment of their company.
Absolutely. I know in the Johnny Bravo story, I mean, he's a pilot and he's supposed to kind of guard the sky so the people down below feel comfortable. And in there's a quote that says, "Courage comes from above." And I think that for any employee to feel comfortable, they really need to have a really good leader and boss over them. And that kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about with how stress can affect our health, because whenever it's a matter of life and death, the story hits so much harder, which especially in the military, that's exactly every single day. You are depending on the man to your right and to your left to take care of you, and vice versa. And whenever we don't feel supported, it can definitely cause a lot of stress to come forth. And so we are obviously about to step into the healthcare field as soon-to-be physical therapists. And I know that burnout and stress rates are so incredibly high. And according to the CDC, which was posted in 2024, the risk of stress and burnout is like 70% for healthcare workers. And I know for physical therapists particularly, we definitely deal with stressful situations from our patients, their families. It's a very hard, difficult time of their lives. And we also have a risk of ongoing hazardous exposures. That was a big one. I mean, we deal with, some things with safety, sometimes with wound care. We are so physical with our bodies. We have to have a lot of skills with patient handling that can be really tough on us. And that was definitely a big risk factor for any healthcare worker that has to have like a lot of patient handling, especially in the acute care setting. That's really, really high. And then the biggest one was increased workloads from short staffing. I know PT Mills is a very hot topic in conversation, and sometimes we put profit over people, and a lot of the companies, we are just double, triple, quadruple booking in order to get the profit margins we're looking for, and that definitely puts more stress on us. And there was actually a statistic in the book that having a job we hate is just as bad or even worse as having no job at all. And we know that we have to make money to live and to support our families, but if we have a job that we don't enjoy, then that is honestly detrimental to our health. And I don't think that we really recognize it, and we talk about how heart disease and hypertension and all of those are such a high cause of death in the United States and in the world, but it can come from high stress hormones. So I know this book talked a lot about cortisol, and Ronnie, you were going to get into that a little bit, because as much as it's kind of there in the short term with stressful situations, it should not be a long-term thing that we have to deal with.
Yeah, so I was going to kind of dig in a little bit more to the chemical aspect that he touched on. As a person who loves science, I really love that he was pulling in cortisol and dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin. And so before I get into that, I just kind of want to give a quote that kind of plays off of what Holly was saying. And that is that this is what it means to work in a place in which the leaders prioritize the well-being of their people. And in return, the people give everything they've got to protect and advance the well-being of one another and the organization. And just to kind of close out what Holly was saying, I think for a lot of us, we can't picture that, to really like lay things down for an organization. But I think that's because we've never experienced an example of a company that's truly putting our well-being first. So going off that, to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the science behind that, he talks a lot about relationships and just how workplaces are motivated, how to lead millennials and what he calls digital natives, which we are all considered a generation of digital natives. We've had access to technology our entire lives. But as he's going through this book, he points out two chemicals that kind of have overridden our workplaces, and that is cortisol and dopamine, where leaders either decide to put so much stress on their employees, a fear of being fired, a fear of being demoted, a fear of being called out or embarrassed or whatever that is, and that is leading to these high cortisol in work environments. Or we have work environments where leaders are so focused on self goals for each employee that each employee comes up with their own personal goals that they personally achieve by themselves. And that does allow dopamine, a great chemical in moderation. But as we all know, dopamine is also the chemical that leads to addiction. It's not a chemical that fosters safety. It's a chemical that makes you feel really good for a really short amount of time and has a really detrimental aftermath. So as we get further into the book, he kind of starts to talk about how as we develop these relationship-focused workplaces, we actually start to enhance these serotonin and oxytocin processes. And as we learn in school and as we see in our daily life, those are the ones that where we have to commit to a long-term goal. And we have to commit to doing that with other people. Those kind of chemicals, those good chemicals, have a much longer lasting satisfaction rate, but they can't be found in a short-term commitment. They can't be found in a goal that we achieve alone. We have to work through the hard things of completing a goal with a big group, completing a task we physically cannot do on our own, which is just not how a lot of companies are structured. So I just kind of wanted to get some of y'all's thoughts about how you expect this like dopamine driven, cortisol driven workplace to kind of affect healthcare in the future.
I think one big part of that, it kind of mentions this towards the end of the book, of different generations are driven by different things. And so like I think with our generation, you know, we're more known as like social media, like scrolling, like trying to find those quick hits of dopamine, and that's kind of what we're known as, and that's led to us being labeled as like the anxious generation or the distracted generation or the lonely generation. And so I think when approaching like a workplace, and I think this is a hard thing to address because things are going towards like working more on computers and sitting at a desk and trying to figure that out. And I think one thing that's cool about PT is, you know, we talked about incorporating AI in a way, but some of that is so we can be more present with patients instead of us being stuck to our computers. And so I think that's a good kind of way to push that. But the book talks a lot about how different generations interact. And so like for some of them, it, you know, for us, it's like, okay, we're kind of used to that fast pace, like, you know, try to get the money, like really quick decisions, those dopamine hits. And then other generations, they're a lot more relational and they want to spend time with their patients. And I mean, I think from my experience, like we are labeled as that, but I see our generation as being like we desire those relationships and we desire deep connection too, because we've already experienced what kind of that social media driven environment is. And so I think kind of with like the chemical aspect of things, my hope for like our generation is that we do want to be a generation that wants to seek out people and pursue relationships, and that I think allows us to connect with our employers because they're that generation that do, you know, desire connection. And so I think it's an interesting just difference between, you know, us millennials, older generations, of that connection that we desire. And that honestly, I think as a generation, we should view it as a challenge of, you know, we should push to have those conversations, even if it might make us uncomfortable at first. That's serving our employer, that's serving the people that we're working with. And also like that also I think trains us up to want to desire more conversation instead of wanting to get that quick hit of dopamine that you talked about.
I think going off the importance of like relationships, and just our generation doesn't always see that because of social media and just our instant gratification. But one of his quotes that I found really interesting was just that social media does not ever replace face-to-face interaction. Like that just can never be replaced, like hormone-wise and just how we build relationships as humans. And so the second half of his book, I feel like the main theme, a lot of it was just that relationship drives teamwork and it drives great leadership. If your leader doesn't know you as a person, how are they going to lead you? And so he talked a lot about the digital addiction and addiction to distraction, and how that kind of gets in the way of building those relationships. And one of the quotes in the back about leading, this little snippet in the back about leading millennials, he says, every time we get on our phone, we take away the opportunity to create a relationship. And so I kind of wanted to hear y'all's thoughts on like, how can we implement that as future leaders, like in our clinics, working with techs, working with patients, how can we implement a culture that kind of thrives on relationship and not necessarily distraction?
I mean, this is just a little example, but I think there's a part in the book, and I don't remember exactly where it is, but it talks about how somebody that was, what are they called? It's the people in the tower that the planes are landing. Control tower.
Air traffic controller.
Yes, air traffic controller, yeah.
Yes.
It gave an example of how they had their phone sitting next to them, and with like, how would you feel if you were like on a plane and they're constantly checking text messages and emails, and then they're talking to the pilots and then going back and forth? How safe would you feel? And so I think one thing that you can implement into like a clinic or wherever you're working, I mean, I'm a big fan of like not having your phone out at all, which I know that can be like a resource, but maybe that means it being more of a work phone, like where your clinic has work phones, or there's like a resource that you can use where you can use your laptop, but trying to implement like, because like whenever a lot of times like I see like if I'm in a professional meeting or whatever, and you know I see somebody look at their phone, like I'm gonna feel terrible, like they're not paying attention. And so like I think even when we're talking about patient interaction, really pushing not having phones, just because even though it's not something that we might not be on, it's something that kind of places the importance on that device. And so I think that would be important kind of moving forward.
Even if you're not distracted, just having your phone, like that look already, is probably not great. I agree.
Yeah, I think just making people feel seen and heard. I know as a patient, that's the number one goal. I know that patient satisfaction rates, as much as they want to improve physically, just the experience that they have with their provider is a huge part of it. And I know that a lot of stress whenever we're in the workplace, or patients especially, if we are not feeling that we're being rewarded or seen, then that just definitely drives a lot of stress. And he actually mentions that in the book, that studies have found that the effort required by a job is not in itself stressful, but rather the imbalance between the effort we give and the reward we feel. And so I know that for me, I really need reassurance. I'm a type 2 Enneagram, and so that's something I want to get y'all's opinions on, kind of reading the book. I need reassurance sometimes that I'm doing a good job, and I think that as a type 2, that's kind of what I need, which requires people to pay attention and not have their phone out and create that relationship so we know each other and how we can better strive. And so I kind of wanted to get your opinions on, being that your type, what Enneagram you are, and kind of the examples in the book. What do you think that you need in the workplace to kind of build those relationships and best strive?
As a different flavor of a type 2, anyone that knows Holly and I knows that we are not the same person. I almost have this issue where, like, in leadership, I need to see that they're being authentic and trustworthy. And he kind of talks about this later, and how two different companies both address, like, for lack of a better term, malpractice. But within their company, one of them was super honest about it, and one of them was a little shady, a little less forward. And for me, as someone who wants to see others help people as much as I do, I can be really frustrated and really not feel very satisfied in my job or in anything if I feel like the people above me are not committed to the same values as I am. And they really can show that in the way that they're leading and the way they're communicating.
Yeah. I think that it also goes beyond the workplace too, like caring personally about what is going on at home. Some going into the office and someone asking, how was that wedding you went to this weekend? Just little things like that, I think, can really go a long way, because I know that a stressful work environment can also be something that you take home with you to your family and to your kids. And so one of the cool quotes, one of the interesting quotes, I should say, that he had in the book that I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about was, children are better off having a parent who works into the night in a job that they love than a parent who works shorter hours but comes home unhappy. Do you guys kind of have an opinion about that quote?
Yeah, I saw that quote and I wrote that I don't think I agree with this right next to it, but I think that it had good intentions, because obviously you want your parents to be happy when they come home, and I understand that. But also I think there's such a downside to not having the time to spend with your kids. And so I think the way that he said that quote kind of oversimplified that problem. because I think you kind of need a good balance of both.
Yeah, because if they're gone every night, then
Yeah.
you're not getting any family time. You're not. And I think that can be detrimental to your kids and the rest of your family.
And even if work is hard, compartmentalization of knowing that whenever I get in the car, I think one of our providers had talked to us about that, is you try not to take work home. And so you can think about your treatments of the day, what went wrong, what went right in the car ride home. But as soon as you open that door to your house, then it's family time. And I know that I didn't totally agree with the quote either, because as much as I have a hard day, I need to personally have the growth and the mindset within myself, knowing that even if I did have a hard day at work, which is going to happen, even if it's the most perfect environment, because people are different. We all have different opinions. Things just don't ever go completely 100% right. So I need to, in myself, have that mentality of, hey, I did have a hard day, but I need to be there for my kids. And I think that the hours aspect of it is where I don't agree, because, I mean, the relationship with your kids is spending time with them and your family. And if I'm working all the time, I'm just not seeing them as much. And kids, especially when they're super young, the main thing is that you're there. And that's why kids, I mean, it kind of can go into the behaviors aspect, which as a future peds, probably physical therapist, I definitely like to get into. But I mean, kids will respond to any behavior, whether negative or positive, but all they want is mom and dad around. So at that point, it's just the face-to-face time aspect with them. So yeah, I don't 100% agree either.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah, I guess it just kind of summarizing the book up, which is some final thoughts. Like, this book was really informational on just how a leader should be with the people under them. You should be able to build relationships and lead them based on those relationships, because like we were talking about, like, not everybody needs the same type of leadership, and you won't know that unless you actually get to know the people. But does anyone else have some final thoughts about the book?
I think one thing is, and we hit on this, I think, with everyone that talked, but just like the title of the book of Leaders Eat Last, of just like the humility. In the book, literally I think in the first chapter, it talks about it's a practice in like Marine culture. And so like junior Marines, they sit down to eat, and people that have been there a lot longer that are leading them, they let them eat first, and then they're invited to eat after. And so it's really kind of representing how we should be in every situation as a leader. Of if we wouldn't ever ask somebody to do something that we wouldn't do, and I think that plays into clinic, but really just seeing and putting others first in that, I think, selfless service mindset, and that others focused mindset is probably the biggest part of leadership. And so I think we all kind of hit on that. But
I think it just comes back to being a people-centered profession, and I think we've learned a lot about that in school, being patient-centered, but also being centered on those around us as well. Seeing each person as a whole person, that brings a lot to the table.
I think a big reflection is what we've talked about is, are leaders born or are they made? And a point that he makes kind of towards the end of the book is good leadership is just like exercise and seeing physical changes. If you look today versus yesterday, or today versus tomorrow, we're not going to see many changes. But if you look at it over a week or a month span, you're going to see those changes. And just know that the impact of leadership is best judged over time. And even if it feels like a big step that needs to be made, little changes every single day do make a big impact.
That's good.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see y'all next time.
Yes, thank you.